Um, we're going to talk about two, I suppose, it's open source methods, and with two kind of slightly different meanings, but that overlap in terms of the scalability of what we're going to do. I'm going to go through some individual case studies of stories that I've done using open web, open data, essentially, plus a bit of traditional investigation. And one of those is slow, it took a bit of time, and the other two are kind of are fast examples of what you can do using just data that's there, that's readily available once you know how to find it. And then on.
And I'll be talking through, so I'm director of product at Medan, where we build tools for global journalism and translation. So we'll be talking through some of our products, the way we think about the products, and think about especially how one is about scaling, these investigative methods for teams and for especially collaborative teams. And then secondly is also what we can learn from more generally from open source principles. As I'm very interested in this word open source, how it gets reapplied from software to other fields, and if there are principles we can start thinking about and more generally about open source journalism.
And I should introduce myself. I'm Malachy Brown, and I work with Reportedly. Andy Carvin, our editor, is here, and these are some of the stories. I'll crack ahead. We're going to have time then for a Q&A, about 20 minutes of it at the end. Reportedly is part of First Look Media. The Intercept is the first newsroom. Field Division was launched late last year, and we're I suppose you could say, the social reporting arm of it, reporting on conflict, human rights, and social justice issues. This investigation is about the manufacture and export of bombs made here in Italy to forces in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and how we trace those from point of origin to being used in Yemen. And a source familiar to me provided us with what he described as a hacked cable, a diplomatic cable from the Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The ministry was reportedly hacked by a group calling itself the Yemen Cyber Army, and these documents later became known as the Saudi cables, a tranche of about 500,000 documents, I believe. And we got some of them, and among them was this letter that was a request from an arms manufacturer in the United Arab Emirates sent to the royal forces saying, in order for us to fulfill this contract that we have with you, we would like you to request permission for this shipment of arms from Italy to pass through Jeddah port in Saudi Arabia, and could you pass that through diplomatic cables and get permission? For a group calling itself the Yemen Cyber Army, hacking Saudi ministries, of course, you need to take tremendous care with a document like this to verify that it is what it says it is, and it's not something that they've created themselves. So we set about doing that by looking at the detail in the document, who it was sent to in order to fulfill the contract with the armed forces. They named the vessel, the ship, the Jolly Cobalto, and they gave the shipping dates, approximately where it was leaving and where it was going to arrive to. Approximate dates, and there were cover letters for this as well. So the chain was from the arms manufacturer to the royal forces, that was then passed on to the United Arab Emirates diplomatic channels, and then on to their embassy in Saudi Arabia, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs requesting it, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent it to the Transport Authority, the port, the Ministry of the Interior, and the Deputy Crown Prince, I think as well, Defence. So immediately I sent the document to a trusted journalist who's a native Arabic speaker, who translated the entire document for us and put in all of the fields and all of the information, and this took some time. Because of differences between Arabic script, we had this verified by Amnesty's Gulf section, and they said it was 100% bar 2 words in the transcript, which we corrected. And she cast some doubt over those 2 words as well. And of course, in the meantime, to check the veracity of this document, I looked at the header data on the facts. So it was, there were letters like MOFA for Ministry of Foreign Affairs and to Wazir al-Difa. So I typed in Ministry of Defense into Google Translate and listened to the Arabic translation of it, and it sounds like Wazir al-Difa. The phone numbers also checked out, the dates checked out, the names of the people who the document was sent to as the ministers, all of that checked out as well. Looking at the ship, the Jolly Cobalto, we found it registered under this Italian logistics company, and on their website it said that the ship was still under construction. However, on another website called Equasis that has lots of shipping data, we found that the ship had actually undergone an inspection in Spain, and according to marine traffic, on the day that I looked at this, the ship was over around Iran. And I contacted marine traffic, and we got records for that ship for the 60-day history, and we could see that in fact this was the maiden voyage of this ship, and that was very important in the veracity of the document, because if you were to fake a document like this, you would choose another ship from Ignacio Messina Group, because lots of their other ships take this route, but this was the maiden voyage, and so therefore that added to the credibility of the document. And indeed it showed it leaving from Genoa, passing through Jeddah, and then over to the UAE. The documents contained a packing list for the different types of bombs. You can see over here MK82 bombs and MK84 bombs were listed in it. And as I investigated this, I spoke to a number of different organizations, and one of them put me in touch with Giorgio Beretta, who is an Italian arms monitor, and he helped me get licenses that were granted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here for RWM Italia, and that included MK82, MK84, and MK83 bombs as well, and that becomes relevant later on. In fact, thousands of these bombs, hundreds of millions in contracts, not just to the United Arab Emirates, but also to Saudi Arabia, and to Australia and to other countries as well. In talking to various different people about, why is this legal? Why would diplomatic permission be sought for this particular shipment? I contacted Human Rights Watch, and they had at the time researchers in Yemen, and they said, "Oh, this is interesting because one of our researchers has just photographed bombs made by RWM Italia at sites in Yemen," and he sent me the photographs of those bombs. And when you zoom in, the MK83 bombs, you can see there that they're the make, and we've got export licenses for those, and this is the cage number 84447. And you can just Google this, or you can check a weapons register, and it's RWM Italia. So now we have the shipment, point of origin, all the way through through Saudi onto their partners in this bombing coalition, the UAE, and we know that they've been going to Saudi as well, and now we have them on the ground in Yemen. And by looking at the EXIF data, you can just go to exifdata.com to try to find for other metadata behind photographs. I got the GPS position. It's out of shot here. You can all sorts of other details here, but the GPS gave me, where these bombs had landed. And then by using wikimapia.org, which allows people to draw polygons around buildings or complexes and describe what they are. It's a crowdsourced map. I got further information about where those bombs were located, a government a complex in Sada in northern Yemen. And using that information, then searched through YouTube for the approximate time frame that the researchers were there, or they thought that this happened, and found eyewitness video of the day after this building being bombed, where we know that those Italian bombs. And of course, verified this. Looking at the alignment of the trees here, there's a white mosque here, which is at an angle to the main building. And you can see here's the mosque, here's the palm tree, here are the other trees here at the front. And you can see this big, tall point in the center of the building, which is here. And then as the camera goes around the rear and flips around. You can see these buildings in the background and other shots. And so then, the question that Andy and myself were asking ourselves, well, Italy is exporting bombs to Yemen during a conflict. It's possibly illegal, but other countries are doing it, so what? So we had a look at the shareholders in the company, and RWM Italia is owned by Rheinmetall. The company in the United Arab Emirates, Burkan, was also previously owned by Rheinmetall. And the arms experts that we spoke to said this basically confirms what we knew, that the people in the Middle East, the company there, they don't have the capacity to make them, but they assemble them. And we found glossy marketing materials showing them videos of them doing that. And in Rheinmetall is based in Germany, and we found that the Norwegian State Retirement Fund, the pension fund in New York State, and also, I think it was about 180 pension and education funds and other funds, JP Morgan Chase. There were numbers of companies that you would recognize, education funds. I think America's biggest education college fund are all invested in Rheinmetall. And so we contacted a lot of those and said, did you know? And of course the answer from several of them was either no comment or, we have a very strict code of ethics. And then to present this, as we all know, video plays well on social networks. So we made a short 2-minute explainer documenting how this played out. And just to show the international scale of it, Andy created a lovely Google Earth tour from the factory in Sardinia to Genoa port. There's actually a ship watcher in Genoa port, and he happened to have video of the Linea Messia ships. So just to illustrate that, we got permission to use that, and then use the marine traffic to track the ship around to the UAE. And we found the materials. That's just a screenshot. I'm sorry, I can't play it. Of the lads in the factories putting them together, and then the fallout from the places that were bombed. Actually, can I? Found that bomb parts manufactured by Italian weapons company RWM Italia were shipped in May 2015 to the United Arab Emirates, one of the countries actively bombing Yemen. Loaded in 6 containers aboard the Jolly Cobalto at Genoa port, the bomb parts were shipped through the Suez Canal and on to Jeddah, where transit permits were granted by Saudi ministries at the behest of the United Arab Emirates Embassy. The shipment was transported around the coast of Yemen and on to Dubai, where it was unloaded and transported to Burkan Munition Systems, an arms manufacturer in Abu Dhabi.
Burkan's Mk-80 series aircraft bomb is a general multi-purpose ballistics bomb. Our aerodynamically streamlined LBGP bombs are
of RWM Italia were dropped on this building in Sada, northern Yemen. Video shared by a local YouTube uploader and independently geolocated and verified by Reportedly shows the damage to the building. No civilians were killed in this attack. However, human rights documenters believed get the idea. And until and then, as part of this investigation, then we published to Twitter. Anybody who follows Reportedly, almost addictively, and we just broke it down into nuggets, little video explainers explaining all of the points that I'm showing to you now, and we threaded them, so you've got a thread of about 20-25 tweets just explaining each step in the process. And as part of it, we published it with The Intercept and Mashable in the US. The Intercept is our sister publication. Mashable thought it was a great story, so they published it, and that helped us reach a bigger audience there. But also, importantly for us, we wanted to draw attention to the story from the people that matter, people in Italy, people in Germany, in Norway, and we had it printed, I think, in 5 or 6 languages, over 12 publications. Il Post were the first. It was picked up by the Sardinia Post and other people as well, TV3, Sardinia, and several others. And as part of that thread, I spoke about this at the morning session about just engaging people and thanking them for their input into this, with their permission, of course. And that kind of helped, that combined with the Italian coverage of what was going on, helped to create a small community around this, and we stayed in touch. And here's a couple of people that I held conversations with over time. Francesco here is another arms monitor, and he helped out when this issue was brought to questions in Italian Parliament, and so on. And Giorgio and Francesca helped to translate what was going on there. We retweeted their tweets. But then, crucially, later on, several months later, I got 2 Twitter DMs from separate people saying there are bombs on the tarmac in Elmas Airport in Sardinia. Could you check that out? I got in touch with Flight Radar. We just had partially obscured or partially evident tail numbers. So Flight Radar helped to identify the plane. So now we had eyes on the plane and when it was going to leave. And basically we also sent photos of these bombs into a community, the online community on Facebook, that a group that numbers of us are members of. And they identified the same bombs. And we tracked where it went. And it was about to land in Jeddah, and then at the last minute it went over to a military airport several hundred miles east. And then again in November there was another one. There were bombs on the tarmac, again another Azerbaijani cargo plane, and shipped over there as well. And we had video of them overnight taking off, and again we tracked that aeroplane. And through that concerted effort and the momentum created by the 5-star movement here in Italy, actually, and politicians like Mauro Pilli and the arms monitors, the pressure was maintained here, and eventually bigger Italian media like Internazionale and it's La Iena, is it, or La Iena, picked it up and ran this story. So I don't know. I've got another couple of examples, but how are we on time? That's great. Yeah. So this is a quick fire one on investigating fast through social media. This is Ukraine, Kramatorsk. So just a warning, in a couple of slides there are mildly graphic images of people who were killed in this attack. And this was a video that popped up on our Twitter feed for Ukraine one day. And of course, given the drama of it and the shelling of a civilian area, we checked it out. And just to very quickly go through how you can piece together all of the information. When I'm looking at this video, I'm looking at these topographical details, the angle of the road, the building with red tiles on the roof, and the water tower in the distance. And it was described as Kramatorsk in Russian, so I just looked for Kramatorsk on Google Maps, and others were saying that it was an attack near the airport. So focusing on that area and opening up photographs that are geolocated to that area, I found this one. So, within 60 seconds we're 100% on the, we're 99% on the location of the thing. And it was probably filmed from these apartments over here. Again, just going back to that aerial view, there's the water tower. Here's where the bombs were coming in. And here's that building with the distinctive tiles on the roof. And so the video was filmed from these apartments here. And then just looking at so that's location. We always say in the verification world, if you're verifying content, you want verification, original, or location, original source, and the date of it. And if you can establish those 3, then you build the context around what this visual, this picture, or this video shows. And looking at the user profile on YouTube of this person, you could see that they were active. In recent weeks, they were posting arts and crafts, some painting stuff, some kiddies, embroidery and things like that. So there was nothing to suggest that this was somebody who was deliberately trying to fake events in Ukraine. And they just happened to be an accidental eyewitness to this. And we can see on their Google Plus page, they live in Kramatorsk, and on VK we actually found her address, which confirmed the building. On VK.com, which is a Russian social media network that's also used in eastern Ukraine extensively, several local residents showed the rockets buried in the ground among their apartments. And Christopher Miller, who was a Mashable reporter, happened to be there, heard it, went in and photographed what he saw, 7 people killed, in that, and we found other videos as well in the area, and we geolocated them to this area around here and other areas around that. So we had several different videos showing different vantage points. What Christopher Miller did was really clever. He took out his compass on his phone and measured the direction that the bombs came from, or the rockets came from, as they were impaled in the ground. And I compared that with what we thought were the types of rockets and the range that they might have, but also the distance, the direction from the front line. So this was a crowdsourced map about the front line as it pushed forward between the rebel forces and the Ukraine forces. And so, we came to the conclusion that they probably came from around this area, around Horlivka. And the OSCE monitors came that day and verified that in their report 24 hours later. But it just shows you in a short space of time the amount of data that's out there that's available to try to piece a story together. Again, a graphic photograph here after bombing of Duma for 10 days. How do you verify this photo? It's a really dramatic photo. First of all, go to Wolfram Alpha. Go to it's what's called a knowledge engine, but it has you could go to any weather site. What I was looking for was it raining yesterday? Was it raining overnight? Is it raining today? Because that photograph was from that morning. Reportedly, it was. Also on Google image search, we use that straight away. We have the extension, Google Images extension installed on Chrome, and you right-click on the picture and see, has Google indexed this image anywhere else? And for a dramatic photo like that, with all of the contrasts that are there, Google would certainly have a record of that from a news report previously, but it didn't on that morning. So I knew pretty much straight away that it was from that morning. Anything else that we can find? Use the local language term for Duma, and we always say, put yourself in the uploader's shoes. Try to think of the terms that they would use to describe something as they were seeing it, and of course that showed more photographs and so on, and that gave us a different angle. Crucially, the mosque, and so again, by doing geolocation, we found the street and the mosque and where this happened. In investigating this, I saw this logo pop up a lot on YouTube videos from Duma, and again, looking for Duma on Facebook, found the Duma Revolution page using the same logo, and they happened to have that photograph up there on that day, and they also gave the name of the photographer who took it. And on Facebook, this guy happened to be friends with a friend of mine. Facebook tells you who's friends, or if there's a crossover, and his Facebook URL was Duma 1985. He looked like a guy who was around 30 years of age from Duma, and he was followed lots of Duma-related pages. And then my friend said, yeah, he lives there. And this guy also gave me lots of other information about what was happening in Duma. He's a photographer with Reuters, and there was some question about the color of the blood on the street, or whether it was paint or what it was, and he said, look, this is what blood looks like, this is my neighbor's, this is, it's iridescent, it glows like that, and that's just an example. So these are sort of other examples that other people have done, which I won't waste your time on, but or take your time up on, but just one that speaks to scalability, is this last one, done by the Carter Center in the US, and they were monitoring the Syrian conflict, and they put in all of the YouTube accounts for all of the rebel factions. And you remember as the rebels started gaining momentum, they would have formation videos like this and have their logos up there, and the Carter Center mapped all of this and across the country and monitored it for a long time, and that enabled them to basically extract a hierarchy, a military structure for these people, so that when they identified new weapons that they started using, all of the different groups that started using these new weapons that were American-made, they linked them all back to one command and control structure. So they basically, they had intelligence about, who the negotiators were in that. Also, they wanted to create a humanitarian corridor into Damascus at one point, and they were able to identify all of the different groups that they should communicate with to enable that to happen. So on a larger scale, if you've got the tools and the processes that Anne is going to talk about, then you can do some really nice stuff. that over to you.
Thank you, Maliki. Let's set it up here. Great. So I was counting, I was writing notes as you were talking about all of the websites you visited and the people you talked to. I think I'm counting like 9 to 10 different sites, and a handful of people in each time you do an investigation.
Yeah, a lot of work.
So I'm really interested in, I'm not a journalist, but more of a product manager, and interested in how we can build tools that support this kind of multiplicity, where we're referencing a lot of different sites, a lot of different places, and how we can really scale this up, both in terms of the tools that are being used, the sites being referenced, and the possibility of including a lot of people. So I'm going to talk through 3 tools that Midan is building. One is called Checkdesk, the other is called Sources, the other is called Bridge. Each of these are designed for investigative work online, and designed in a very collaborative way. And to frame this a little bit, I'm also very interested, again, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, is what can we learn from the open source world? There's a lot of conversation right at this festival about benefits of automation versus engagement, and what does this all look like? And I think there are a lot of lessons from open source software, where open source developers are dealing with these same things: engagement, automation, and scale and impact, and finding effective ways to do that. So I'm curious what that might look like in journalism. No answers, but more questions, but interested to talk about that. So this is the Midan team, or a team of 12, and there are 2 pictures of the Midan team, actually. And so one is, we were actually gathered at a retreat in Koltijoko, about 2 hours away from here last year. But the Midan team is also, we as much as we value people, we also value bots, and we were interested in automated systems and ways to facilitate the work that journalists are doing. But ultimately, the tools are meant to help journalists do their work better. So I'm going to talk through Checkdesk right now, and this is an investigation done by Bellingcat, a group founded by Elliot Higgins, who's done a lot of work in Syria and in Ukraine, doing verification around weapons and attacks there. And the Bellingcat team often works with a lot of collaborators. I believe over 100 people have been using the Bellingcat Checkdesk instance to do verification. And so it's a good example of what collaborative verification might look like on a platform. So Elliot's team was doing military vehicle tracking and tracking sightings, and they use the Checkdesk platform in a number of ways, and I'll just walk through some of those pieces here. So one is it looks like a basic site. You can just drop in what you're looking at, add a title. But we have little features, just like you can add a report, you can add a video, you can add a picture, you can add a tweet, and anyone who's approved in the system can do this. It's important to note that they're approved in the system. This is not a totally open system, but that a set number of collaborators can add different reports, and they're often working with number of reports at the same time. So there were 29 collaborators on this one story. Under each story, there's a wide variety. This is what the reports look like. You can imagine just a big log, and people are uploading all kinds of media content that's available. And under each media content, we have the check log, and this is important because it's a way of showing to people the steps that you've taken or the steps that your team has taken. And so, just to zoom in on a little bit, under each video, people will add notes, and so you can see that there are a number of different people who are commenting, adding notes as they're investigating the veracity of a report about a sighting of a tank, and then each piece there adds critical information. And so again, when you're cross comparing, you want to make sure that information is available publicly so other people can corroborate. That doesn't work for every investigation. There's certain human rights cases where you might want to have a private investigation, but in this case, having everything out in the open was an important part of this. And so just a few more examples here. You can see that it's actually different people who are adding those corroborations, adding those highlights, and adding the pieces that are necessary to determine a verification. And then what Checkdesk allows is setting a status. You can say that it's verified. You can say it's in progress. You can say it's false. Recently, we added the ability to add custom verification notes. So there might be other situations where you might say that it's undetermined, for instance, meaning like you've done all the research, but you're still not sure. And this verification stamp has two components. One is the stamp itself, which says, that little check mark, but it says by who. And it's important here that again, it's that transparency about who has done the verification. Because if you can imagine in a world of multiple people verifying, we all interpret facts differently. And so we make sure that it's clear that the source of the verification is as visible as the verification itself. And again, I think that's a principle that we can start aiming for. General military vehicle tracking on Checkdesk, they worked with 441 reports in the period of 2 months, studies could take from hours to days, depending on people's time commitment. Some people would contribute just once, some people contributed multiple times, and there's a key group of 6 project managers who are overseeing everything. And in total, there's 32 people contributing and collaborating around verification and geolocation. And many of the similar steps that Malachy was outlining in his research. We're starting to go into a new project with Witness, the Human Rights Research Group, and in partnership with FISAHARA, which does work in the Western Sahara region. And each time there's a new partner, we start thinking about what else can we do, what else can Checkdesk do to support the specific needs of their research. And given that this work has a different set of goals, in addition to journalism, it's also about policy advocacy. The Western Sahara region is one of the few post-colonial regions that is still struggling for independence and they're in conflict right now with Morocco. It's a peaceful conflict, but Western Saharans are attempting to gain independence from Morocco. And so a lot of these videos are documenting human rights abuses that Witness hopes to use and the FISAHARA team hope to use in their advocacy work. And so we started to add new fields. As Malachy pointed out, context is really critical. And when videos or photos are uploaded to social media sites, often that metadata is stripped from the images. And so we added fields for structured metadata within Checkdesk. And so we added the fields for location. We added fields for data. People have to manually go find the original. But all of these become have a structured data set that can then be exported. Checkdesk is a tool it's part of a pathway for journalists. It's not that's not the be-all, end-all. It's one step along a chain. So these are exported and they can be used in reports in a collective way, so that we can the team at Witness and FISAHARA can aggregate both locations and types of incidents using this metadata. The other product that we're working on is called Sources, and here it's really growing out of the recognition that in addition to verifying content, it's also just as important to verify the sources of those content, and especially over longitudinal relationships that you might have with different sources. And this is a new project right now. These are designs we're just going into beta testing and starting to work with potential partners. But the idea around sources is that you are frequently, as a journalist, referencing people, whether they're on Twitter, on YouTube, on WhatsApp. And the ability to, one, maintain a record of the communications that you've had with them, and then two, to maintain institutional memory. So that newsrooms who are working in teams can remember who they've talked to and how. I'm sure many newsrooms are, especially if you're contacting a lot of people, it's hard to remember who's out there. And so this is really designed for journalists. We're talking a lot with former community managers and also people working in newsrooms to try to bring in some of the best practices around relationship management and bring that into a setting where it's very specific to networked journalism. And so you can see in this design here that the sources gives you the ability to add a source like a YouTube account, and then it will automatically gather some of that metadata, number of uploads, the date that they joined, number of playlists. Again, each of these bits become an important piece for the journalist. None of them are be-all, end-all, but each of them give that additional context that Malachy identified as really so important. So, for instance, if that account joined just yesterday and is reporting on an event, that will just give you some flags to check out. And then we have a little log at the bottom. You can see that line. where people can keep a record of the conversations they've had, the topic areas of expertise of this source. And so again, it's a collaborative format and allows for journalists to keep that institutional memory. We're thinking about other ways that sources could work. So many of the Meedown tools are designed to integrate with other tools. And I think this is another open source principle that we might think about with open source investigations. And so you can imagine, and these are all early stage ideas, but the ability to have sources notify you when the person makes a tweet about a certain topic, or to cite the source in Checkdesk. So to go from sources back to Checkdesk and to quote them in a report, and then have that report then show up back in sources so you can corroborate all the evidence, and eventually build reputations over time. And so you can keep track of the people you're talking to. And the third Meedown product is, is looking at language and translation. Especially in a world of greater diversity online, we're moving towards a majority connected internet population, and English will soon be a minority language on the internet. And we're interested in how translation can fit into this larger process of gathering news. And so what you're looking at here is a map from 2009 of geolocated tweets in Europe. And so those colors look like geographic boundaries, but what they are, this actually colors, each color represents a different language. And so we have this image of the internet connecting us across boundaries, but so often language barriers play a role in reinforcing the same geographic boundaries that we're living in. And so this was in 2009. This language diversity has only increased. And if we were to recreate this map at a global scale today, I think we would see, once again, a lot of both regional and national boundaries recreated. So we're interested in how, again, in terms of open source investigations, where does translation, how does that play a role? Excuse me. So I'm going to talk a little bit through Bridge, and if you have Twitter, you can see Bridge in action. We've been translating, when I say we, I mean me, with my poor Spanish, translating some of the Spanish tweets from the International Journalism Festival. And obviously Italian would have been a better use case, but we're just trying out one use case. And what Bridge allows you to do, so you can check out IJF2EN, so IJF2 English. You can see Bridge in action. You can see how we're using translated tweets. The translated tweet format, we're using the TT, to grab an original tweet. We reply to it so that the original tweet is always attached to the translated tweet, and then we post that translation. So we were doing this live during RightsCon last year. Not last week. RightsCon is a human rights and technology convention that was happening in San Francisco last week. And we're partnered with Global Voices Lingua, who are using Bridge to translate a number of tweets from English to Spanish and English to Arabic. And so you can see the original tweet in English by Sam Gregory. And then just below in RightsCon Espanol is the TT of Sam Gregory, TT being translated tweet. It's a convention we're experimenting with. And then the translation, and then a link to go back to the original. And then you can also see that the translation appears as a card, because often when you're translating, you can't always fit 140 characters on 140 characters. It's especially true when working from very different languages like Chinese to English or English and German. And so we include the full text as well as an image, an attached image, and then the user can click to go see it on the larger project. And so the idea here is to use, again, Meedown tools are meant to be integrated with networks. Bridge is a bridge from one tweet to another, but the end goal here is so that it lands back on Twitter. And so for most users who are not using the platform, we're trying to design an experience that ultimately doesn't require you to go anywhere else, but just has you following the same hashtags, the same, and just accounts that are relevant to your language. So the way Bridge works is we have a mobile app and we have a Chrome extension. And so the mobile app is available right now for Apple iOS, and you can download it in the App Store. And this is the translator's experience. So You can see the original tweet in Arabic. You can see the translation. That's the composer, where people can compose a translation. And then what's just as important is this ability to annotate. In open source conventions, people leave a lot of documentation about their work, and here we want to give translators the opportunity to document and annotate the translation they made. Many of us are here probably bilingual. You know that when you're translating, you can't just do word for word. You often have to interpret on the side. And then there are a number of tools. There's the little robot, which gives you machine translation, and the little book, which gives you a dictionary. Each of these tools are not designed to replace the human translator, but are designed to facilitate the work of the human translator. And so again, it's a very human-focused work with the support of robots and algorithms that support the kind of work that they're trying to do. We're thinking about this in the context of breaking news, but it applies in a lot of different cases. When we're doing translations around the U.S. debates, when we're translating Spanish to English, we did a translation set with Egyptian journalists Nora Yunus and Sarah Othman. They were translating the opening of the new Suez Canal and translating some of those tweets from Arabic to English. And under certain conditions, with the right network, with the right set of people and the right preparation, translation can be turned around in 3 to 5 minutes. And the trick there, of course, is maintaining quality and maintaining trust in that quality. And so, we really emphasize that because it's human-driven, it really depends on the quality of the network and the preparation involved. And it's designed to be shared. So any translation that you click on, you can also grab a permalink, an embed code. You can share it to Twitter, share it to Facebook. Again, Medan products are not meant to be the landing place. They're meant to be a pipeline to another space. And so designed to work well with a blog, with a Twitter account that you've already set up. So I think I talked a lot through the card already, but just very briefly, this is how we designed the translation card for legibility. And then the Chrome extension here is a simple drop-down when you can right-click on any tweet when you're on your desktop. And it allows you to either save the project, and that's right here on the left. You can just save it for later, or you can make a translation, and that's on the right-hand side. And you can quickly make those translations. Some translators during the RightsCon project were translating in less than 3 minutes, and that's a benchmark that we're trying to meet. We're not quite there yet, but trying to design for both speed and quality. So just to get on the more meta level, and before we open it up for conversation, I think when we're thinking about open source, and I want to go through the product again and talk about certain open source principles that I think we could learn from that might apply to journalism. Again, no answers here, but just questions. And when we're talking about open source, I think one of the principles that really stands out to me is open source security tools, where the very transparency of the code is how they maintain security. It's the fact that people who are familiar with the code can be certain that an app like Tor is maintaining people's privacy. And it's a difference between privacy by design versus privacy by promise. And so this ability to clearly show the original, to clearly show who verified, to show those steps, is the transparency of the verification and translation process is one way of demonstrating the accuracy of the work that was done. In the open source community, you have different models of participation. Is that this notion of open is true. Anyone can modify the code, but it's a system of unequals. If you modify the code, you have to submit a pull request, which means that you have to ask the original if they will accept your code, and that original person can then make a decision on whether or not they accept it. And this kind of semi-open model, I think, again, could apply to journalism, where it's a system of unequals, where everyone is invited to participate, but there are people who are overseeing the process, who make sure that it's quality software being produced. I think we can think about this in journalism in interesting ways. And the motivations for open source are often centered around community. And so people talk about an open source community. What does that look like? Is there an open journalism community? It's the motivation is varied. It's not just about truth-telling and about investigation. It's also about feeling like you're part of something. And so how can we design tools that encourage community, that make people feel like they're part of a bigger project, a bigger picture, and get them excited about the process? And then there's also this notion of interoperability, that open source tools are often designed to work with each other. Our CTO often talks about the web being built on open platforms, on tools that can work together are often more effective. And when we're thinking about often using 9 different tools, or dozens of tools to do an investigation, how can we design better forms of interoperability? How can a tool like Checkdesk be a pipeline to a blog post, to an article, in as seamless a way as possible? And so, again, less of a destination and more of a, we have a product called Bridge, but a bridge to, from people to projects and larger projects. And then a final point that I was just thinking about that I didn't have as a slide is also that in open source community, it's not just building pipelines to better software, it's building pipelines for better developers. And so is there a world in which tools and processes can be building pipelines for better journalists and training journalists who are curious about these investigative techniques to be building their skills, leveling up, and ultimately leading investigations in the future? What does that world look like? And is there a way that we can do this while also maintaining the really need for quality and assurance that so many investigations require? So I wanted to demo this slide, but the Wi-Fi's been a little shaky. But just to close, this is a good example of a tool that's literally open source software, but is also designed to integrate with a lot of different platforms. And it's called Memebuster. It's a fork of the Vox meme generator. And what this allows you to do is to verify in real time, to communicate your verification more effectively. In other words, often when misinformation is going viral, how can you communicate that, oops, no, actually, that is incorrect? How can we make the correction go viral just as quickly as the misinformation? There's a lot of challenges there. There's a lot of complications. There's more than just these images. There's also strategies that are required. But what Memebuster allows you to do is drag and drop an image and then quickly slap on a sticker and some text that says, okay, no, this is a real event from the Paris attacks where the Eiffel Tower's lights were turned off, but the belief from folks who hadn't known much about Paris is that it was turned off because of the attacks, but actually lights were going off, went off every time at 1 a.m. And so people could put a little sticker, a little caution sign, and then add a note. So you can check that out. You can try it out. It's at memebuster.checkdesk.org. And then what we're hoping to add is a little button that tweets it out. So after you generate this, you push a button, and it tweets it out. And again, it's a tool, one tool of many. It's a larger tool set, a larger system of strategies. But again, benefits both from the actual open source software, but then hoping to contribute to open source journalistic processes. So that's the overview. Grazie mille. And three different products, each product designed to play with each other, to play with other pieces of software. So thank you.
I'm conscious that we're leaving time short because of my overrunning presentation earlier on. But any questions? Yep.
Okay, yeah. I work at the Open Knowledge Foundation Germany, so we come a bit from the open source area. So I was wondering, let me first express how much I enjoyed both presentations, and I really, really like this new kind of open source journalism. But a question I immediately had, like if we look at these principles from the open source community that are now kind of overflowing, then we have to think about licenses and Creative Commons, because who owns the story if you work together with it with 30 people? Do you acknowledge them all? And another thing was the sources application that you showed, how with all these kind of things, and also with your contributors and collaborators, how do you ensure, because these are very sensitive stories, I would imagine, how do you ensure and how do you talk with your contributors and your community about privacy issues? That's not so much an open source issue normally on GitHub and stuff, but for your kind of stories, definitely, I would think.
Yeah, I can speak to from a practice point of view. I can imagine, having worked collaboratively with people before in verifying things and trying to find all of the pieces that fit together, having a tool like Checkdesk where you can do that across newsrooms, for instance, or if you had a couple of people who are on the Yemen beat or on the Ukraine beat, there's tremendous power in that, provided you internally come to your understanding about who's going to publish or what the rules are around that publication. And similarly, with the Yemen investigation that I did, there were some people who didn't want to be associated with it and just a German translator, for instance, would suffice, and they could reference that if they needed to. But you just check with your sources, and you apply the same security as you would. One of the things we'll be talking about tomorrow at the session about protecting eyewitnesses is that issue of security, because not everybody understands that what they're putting out is in public. Twitter is understood to be a public medium, but Facebook, not always. People don't understand privacy settings. So particularly in situations like that, you have a journalistic responsibility, and I think it would just be, that would be it from me.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to Malachi's answer. I think really it's, the software facilitates the work, but agreements among the collaborators and really having open communication, I think, is key. I can speak a little bit to the security, especially as we're thinking about human rights, work being done on Checkdesk. Checkdesk is designed as an open platform, but can also be a very private platform. But when we advise on security, it's important to remember that security goes beyond the platform. And so we don't require real name registration. We don't require that people identify themselves when they join. But when they're doing really sensitive work, we advise them not to use the platform, actually. And so they'll use PGP emails. They'll use other means to have secure communications until we're confident that we do have security on our platform. And I would say that's true for Checkdesk, and especially for sources. I think our commitment to human rights is really strong, and sometimes that means that our tool is not the best for certain cases.
Any other questions or comments? No. I mean, I think the one thing that you touched on with community when you tested Bridge on the Ustink protest was that Ustink is the rubbish problem that is happening in Beirut, rubbish piling up in the streets, and of course there was a lot of activity around that and mobilization of that community, and you tested it out first on that, and I don't know if you want to talk about that, but people seem to really
we did, and
get involved.
People got involved, and what's interesting is Slack has become a really important part of how our communities are doing the translation, and so we're trying to learn a lot from Slack because people will have the kind of Slack back channel at the same time that they're doing translations on Bridge, and becomes a motivator. And so people are often motivated by social issues, like the Ustink protests, the New Suez Canal. And it's an easy way to find translators, because that's their way of participating in movements, especially if they're from diaspora communities.
And thinking as a journalist who might be covering that, or a publisher, the ability to embed those cards with people who are from, trusted translators from Beirut, who also bring their own networks to this as well, into a live blog or into a story that's covering that, it's just very appealing, I think. Anything else? Yeah. Great. We can finish early, so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's great.
Fill this contract that we have with you, we would like you to request permission for this shipment of arms from Italy to pass through Jeddah port in Saudi Arabia, and could you pass that through diplomatic cables and get permission? For a group calling itself the Yemen Cyber Army, hacking Saudi ministries, of course, you need to take tremendous care with a document like this to verify that it is what it says it is, and it's not something that they've created themselves. So we set about doing that by looking at the detail in the document, who it was sent to in order to fulfill the contract with the armed forces. They named the vessel, the ship, the Jolly Cobalto, and they gave the shipping dates, approximately where it was leaving and where it was going to arrive to, approximate dates. And there were cover letters for this as well. So the chain was from the arms manufacturer to the Royal Forces, that was then passed on to the United Arab Emirates diplomatic channels, and then on to their embassy in Saudi Arabia, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs requesting it, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent it to the Transport Authority, the port, the Ministry of the Interior, and the Deputy Crown Prince, I think as well, Defence. So Immediately I sent the document to a trusted journalist who's a native Arabic speaker who translated the entire document for the stories. I'll crack ahead. We're going to have time then for a Q&A, about 20 minutes of it at the end. Reportedly is part of First Look Media. The Intercept is the first newsroom. Field of Vision was launched late last year, and we're this, I suppose you could say, the social reporting arm of it, reporting on conflict, human rights and social justice issues. This investigation is about the manufacture and export of bombs made here in Italy to forces in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and how we trace those from point of origin to being used in Yemen. And a source familiar to me provided us with what he described as a hacked cable, a diplomatic cable from the Ministry of the Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The ministry was reportedly hacked by a group calling itself the Yemen Cyber Army, and these documents later became known as the Saudi cables, a tranche of about 500,000 documents, I believe. And we got some of them, and among them was this letter that was a request from an arms manufacturer in the United Arab Emirates sent to the royal forces saying, in order for us to fulfill us and put in all of the fields and all of the information, and this took some time. Because of differences between Arabic script, we had this verified by Amnesty's Gulf section, and they said it was 100% bar 2 words in the transcript, which we corrected, and she cast some doubt over those 2 words as well. And of course, in the meantime, to check the veracity of this document, I looked at the header data on the fax. So it was, there were letters like MOFA for Ministry of Foreign Affairs and to Wazir al-Difa. So I typed in Ministry of Defense into Google Translate and listened to the Arabic translation of it, and it sounds like Wazir al-Difa. The phone numbers also checked out, the dates checked out, the names of the people who the document was sent to as the ministers, all of that checked out as well. Looking at the ship, the Jolly Cobalto, we found it registered under this Italian logistics company, and on their website it said that the ship was still under construction. However, on another website called Equasis that has lots of shipping data, we found that the ship had actually undergone an inspection in Spain, and according to marine traffic, on the day that I looked at this, the ship was over around Iran. And I contacted marine traffic, and we got records for that ship for the 60-day history, and we could see that in fact this was the maiden voyage of this ship, and that was very important in the veracity of the document, because if you were to fake a document like this, you would choose another ship from Ignacio Messina Group, because lots of their other ships take this route, but this was the maiden voyage, and so therefore that added to the credibility of the document. And indeed it showed it leaving from Genoa, passing through Jeddah, and then over to the UAE. The documents contained a packing list for the different types of bombs. You can see over here MK82 bombs and MK84 bombs were listed in it. And as I investigated this, I spoke to a number of different organizations, and one of them put me in touch with Giorgio Beretta, who's an Italian arms monitor, and he helped me get licenses that were granted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here for RWM Italia, and that included MK82, MK84, and MK83 bombs as well, and that becomes relevant later on. In fact, thousands of these bombs, hundreds of millions in contracts, not just to the United Arab Emirates, but also to Saudi Arabia, and to Australia and to other countries as well. In talking to various different people about, why is this legal? Why would diplomatic permission be sought for this particular shipment? I contacted Human Rights Watch, and they had at the time. We're going to talk about two I suppose, it's open source methods, and with two kind of slightly different meanings, but that overlap in terms of the scalability of what we're going to do. I'm going to go through some individual case studies of stories that I've done using open web, the open web, open data, essentially, plus a bit of traditional investigation. And one of those is slow, it took a bit of time, and the other two are kind of are fast examples of what you can do using just data that's there, that's readily available once you know how to find it. And then on.
And I'll be talking through, so I'm Director of Product at Midan, where we build tools for global journalism and translation. So I'll be talking through some of our products, the way we think about the products, and think about especially how one is about scaling these investigative methods for teams and for especially collaborative teams. And then secondly is also what we can learn from more generally from open source principles. As I'm very interested in this word open source, how it gets reapplied from software to other fields, and if there are principles we can start thinking about in more generally about open source journalism.
And I should introduce myself. I'm Malachi Brown, and I work with Reportedly. Andy Carvin, our editor, is here, and these are some of